Hello and welcome to the stream. Today it's our coffee chat and I am Dr. Rachel Tatman. I always forget to do my channel intro. I'm Dr. Rachel Tatman. I'm a language technology educator and my channel is for anyone who cares about language technology and other people. So cheers to you, another person. And I actually have an extra big coffee today because we got a lot to talk about. Oh yeah, you can see right at the top, you can see all the links and where we are. So each of the little Ecosia icons is going to be, you know, a change of topics. The first bunch are research, and then the second bunch is resources, just like practical stuff that you should know about. I've been fighting with my chroma keying all morning. And then the third bunch is law, legal stuff, politics, stuff like that. And then the fourth bunch is ethics, general discussion there, things I think are relevant, stuff that's come up. Vinay says waiting. We should be live. Let me double check. I will double check that the stream is actually going good. I'm pretty sure it should be, but sometimes there's issues. Yeah, it's good. It's definitely live. Okay, welcome to the thing that is definitely live. But thanks for letting me know, Vinay. All right. So ethics, stuff like that. And then the last section is always just like little miscellaneous fun stuff, little palate cleanser. And just as a reminder, I didn't open the tab for it, but if you are interested in supporting me and you'd like all of the links in like a document format, that one, my coffee's on the screen, and that's the easiest way to get them. All right. Okay. Let's hop in. So we'll get started with research, and this week was fact, the ACM fact. So if you remember the video I did 2 weeks ago, I think, on, you know, what could possibly go wrong, why not to build unethical technology, the ACM, the Association for Computing Machinery, I'm pretty sure, I can never remember like the actual acronym, is a professional organization in computing, and this is one of the conferences that they run. Fabulous. Yeah, confirmation that we're doing good. And it is FACT, formerly FAT. You might have seen that as well, FAT-ML. So for fairness, accountability, and transparency in machine learning. And it was in Korea this time, hence Korean Standard Time and the, Hangul, and all online. So if you're interested, I think you needed tickets if you wanted to attend live. I've mostly been following on Twitter. This has been a hectic week for me in my life. We've had some exciting electrical problems, so if I suddenly disappear, know that something somewhere has gone a little bit wrong, but probably I'm fine. So we're going to start off with a couple papers from this conference. So I think one of them's going to be on archive, but it has been published. This is not a preprint. So kicking off, this is a Beba Verheyen Stan channel, huge fan of her work, and she and co-authors received Best Paper. So if you're not familiar, a lot of conferences in computing will have obviously it's very competitive to get a paper published at all. A lot of people submit. Not everyone is accepted after peer review. And then based on the peer reviews, a lot of times there'll be different committees run by different chairs, and each of the committees will be like, oh, I think this is the best paper, and nominate it. And then usually there's some sort of like, voting or discussion process, and then they pick what the review and committee thinks is the best paper at the conference. And this year it was The Values Encoded in Machine Learning by Beba Verheyen and co-authors down here. Luke, hello, welcome to the stream, good to see you. Also, just like an interesting side note for any of you working in research, the paper was rejected twice, apparently, and got really harsh reviews. It was deemed unlikely to make any impact. Not that that should be a criteria for evaluating a paper. So big congratulations to all the authors. And as I mentioned, we talked about Dr. Verheyen dissertation being published last week. So you can go back and check that out if you're interested in more details. And then the paper is The Values Encoded in Machine Learning. Another paper from FACT is out of the Algorithmic Justice League, which is a nonprofit / research / think tank that I believe was founded by Joy Buolamwini, and apologies if I ever mispronounce anyone's name. It's not my intention. Feel free to correct me in the comments. And it is a paper looking at very small font. Let me make this a little bit bigger. Looking at different algorithmic auditing organizations and what they actually do in their audit. So this is something that's coming up a lot as a business model. So particularly given the, one sec, I'm just gonna adjust this because it's driving me nuts that I can keep seeing the chroma keying going on and off. There we go. I don't need shoulders. We'll just be down here like that. Especially given the upcoming European legislation that's probably going to require auditing. Maybe, I don't know, it's in process. Like I've mentioned before, I'm not super familiar with the European legislation process, but it feels like it's coming. So there's been a bunch of businesses that have, come up that are all like, oh, we'll audit your algorithms for us. We can prove that you're fair, et cetera, et cetera. And this is a paper looking at sort of a meta review of the different companies, I guess, people that are doing this right now. So it's 438 individuals and 189 organizations who are engaged in algorithmic audits or whose work is directly relevant to algorithmic audits, conducted an anonymous survey, and then interviewed industry leaders. And something that really struck me from this paper is, let me see if I can sort of, the information on the, so I'm trying to pick out the particular point. So these are the things that they looked at. So by the number of auditors is the access here with a theoretical maximum of 46. So accuracy, fairness, statistical soundness of the training sample data, quality of the training data, real world outcomes, adherence to legal and regulatory requirements, regulatory, security, privacy, and consent implications, corporate environment engineering processes, existence, quality of system to report harm, appeal decisions, only half, which feels a little bit low to me, and then other here. And the big thing that jumped at me out of this paper, and it's something the authors discuss quite a bit, is that most of these auditors are not looking at stakeholder involvement. So stakeholders are people who care about a system. They may be the people building the system, they may be the people using the system, they may be people who do not choose to interact with the system but are still affected by it. And they're really not being centered in auditing work right now, which strikes me as potentially an issue. And as you can see, it's a little bit of a bleak paper, but I think it's helpful in that it points out areas for growth. So standards are thin at best. We really kind of don't have them just yet. There are big differences between auditors and non-auditors. Lots of people want auditing to be legislated and required, which, I mean, makes sense, especially if you're already providing the service. And then the lack of buy-in is pretty widespread. So if you're being audited, you get a report saying all the things you've done wrong. A lot of people don't like to hear that. And then sort of a lot of disagreement about different types of legislation. Yeah, anyway, good paper. I don't want to, go into it too deeply because you can just read the paper, but I think it's a good start. I think that the Algorithmic Justice League in particular has done a lot of work in education in this area, right? So you may be familiar with Joy's work on race and facial recognition and accuracy by, race and gender. So a lot of the sort of discourse around, facial recognition systems are racist comes from Joy's work that she's done and her research. And the Algorithmic Justice League, they did the Coded Bias documentary. That was their work. So they've done a lot of education around this topic, and I think I appreciate sharing work about areas for improvement and sort of state of the art, or state of the field, I guess. Craig Opp says, interesting concept of lobbying for auditing when you sort of have a semi-cornered market on auditing. Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. I don't really know what the future of auditing will be. I would like for it to have a lot of input from social scientists. I would like for it to have a lot of input from people studying, you know, human-computer interaction, socio-technical systems. I would like for, you know, user advocates as a role, right? So someone whose entire job is to, you know, in the development process, argue directly for users and their rights and needs. And I know that that's kind of part of UX, kind of part of design, but I mean, going even further than that, right? So sort of like what a developer advocate is in a machine, not a machine learning, I mean, any sort of software company, right? I don't know if we'll get that, but that's my vision of the future. All right, and then another paper out of fact. I think people just say fact. Looking at adversarial scrutiny of evidentiary statistical software. So I'm just going to sort of quickly read through the abstract and then discuss it a little bit. The US criminal legal system increasingly relies on software output to convict and incarcerate people, and if that doesn't give you heart palpitations, congratulations on your cardiac health. It probably shouldn't, but Jiminy cricket. In a large number of cases each year, the government makes these consequential decisions based on evidence from statistical software, such as probabilistic genotyping, environmental audio detection, and tool mark analysis tools that defense counsel can't fully cross-examine or scrutinize, right? So someone's accused you of something, the prosecutor comes up and says, hey, computer says you did it, and your lawyer can't really, interact with the computer program. And because, the computer said it, there's this concept called automation bias, which is if there's an automated decision that's been made, even if it's just made in an advisory capacity, people are more likely to trust that decision than, go through and do the whole thing themselves. And that makes sense, right? That's easier. In theory, computers should be labor-saving devices, but sometimes the labor is very necessary, and I would say this is one of those times. This undermines the commitments of the adversarial criminal legal system, which relies on the defense's ability to probe and test the prosecution's case to safeguard individual rights. And I would say that this is sort of a big issue right now in, just in general, right? Law enforcement is using a lot of machine learning algorithms. We talked about data brokers a while ago where, if I came up and asked you that information, right, or if I tried to get that information from you, I'd need to, talk to your lawyer, or, if I wanted to rummage around in your house and see what you've bought recently, I'd need a search warrant. But I could buy that information from a data broker, which may not be accurate, right? It might be inferred and inaccurate, and there's no, legal protection there. So anyway, so there's definitely a sort of overarching problem where automation is opening up new realms that weren't possible, and that the balance of power is going from, citizens to law enforcement to prosecutions and to like district attorneys and stuff like that. I'm not a lawyer, I'm a machine learning expert. And that, again, just doesn't sit right with me and doesn't make me feel good. Responding to this need to adversarially scrutinize output from such software, we provide robust adversarial testing as an audit framework to examine the validity of evidentiary statistical software. We define and operationalize this notion of robust adversarial testing for defense use by drawing on a large body of recent work in robust machine learning and algorithmic fairness. We demonstrate how this framework both standardizes the process for scrutinizing such tools and empowers defense lawyers to examine their validity for instances most relevant to the case at hand. So basically they're saying like, okay, we're not going to get people to stop using computers, but how can we give the defense a fighting chance? We further discuss existing structural and institutional challenges within the US criminal legal system that may create barriers for implementing this and other such audit frameworks, and close with a discussion on policy changes that could help address these concerns. So, and again, I'm not a lawyer, I'm not a legal scholar, but lots to do. Craig says a little bit of explanatory information. Toolmark software helps determine which types of tools were used at the scene of a crime by analyzing images or Doppler plots and stuff. Okay, that's helpful. So like, was it your hammer that was used to hammer the nails that were involved with this crime for some reason? I don't know, maybe you boarded up a door you weren't supposed to or something. Maybe it was a fire exit, right? Let's say that. Yeah. Anyway, good to have that information. And then environmental audio detectors are tools that police deploy in areas with lots of gunfire to help alert them to the possibility of gunfire. Oh, yes, like, what's the one that was super controversial called Sure Shot, maybe? Anyway, again, it was wide scale, audio surveillance. And I think they may also be used for things like if you're listening to a phone recording, trying to figure out where that phone recording was taken. So just as an example, fluorescent lights produce a hum. So if you find that hum in an audio recording, probably at some point there were fluorescent lights involved, is sort of a general example there. But I don't know. Yeah, shot spot. That's what it's called. Thanks, Craig. Yeah, shot spot was the thing that I was thinking about. Yeah. And you can think about, if you're, let's say, a jury and a member of a jury, and you don't have a lot of statistical training, which I would say most people in the US don't, and you're told, well, with an 80% probability, we think that it's this person. And what you don't know is that, the lowest that this model tends to give is a 90% probability, and the highest it tends to give is like a 98% probability, and that 80% is actually not that likely. But you don't have an idea of the model parameters, and the defense also doesn't, right? They can't get that information out of it without having, some sort of adversarial approach like is proposed here. Then that's, potentially very misleading. Anyway, moving on. So this, I don't know why I put this in the research section. I wouldn't say that this is research. So this is from Cohere, which is it's a startup. They also have a research lab that I mentioned last time. And it's a paper, I guess, position blog post, I'm guessing, about why you need a large language model for intent recognition. I don't think this is true. Craig says true, yeah. So those of you who are familiar with me from before may know that I used to work at Rasa, which is a company that does an open source chatbot framework, and also commercial software on top of that. And I would say that the single biggest problem with chatbots does not tend to actually be identifying intents correctly. If you have, honestly, it works perfectly well with keywords. Not that I'm recommending that everyone goes out and run keywords, but particularly for very simple chatbots, it's usually perfectly fine to just have a keyword-based, rule-based approach. The issue with chatbots is design and people not using genuine conversational interactions and not, really capturing the conversational and behavioral patterns that they're trying to. Anyway, so this is the sort of position here. You need to correctly identify the customer's problem and desired outcome, and they're equating that to intent, which sometimes it is, sometimes it's not. And then achieving the customer's desired outcome the first time. This I would agree with. Having to go back and correct a system a lot is very frustrating. And then decreasing time to resolution. Yes, again, people want fast systems that save them time. I think those tend to be the systems that people enjoy most. I don't know that you need a large language model for this, and particularly in a voice-based situation, you're going to run into latency issues. So anyway, I just saw this and was like, I disagree, and this is me disagreeing. Craig says, true, in relation to the jury most likely not understanding the statistics related to models or the model parameters involved in the software being used. Yeah, and I mean, it's what they're supposed to do, right? But I think that intentionally or unintentionally, lawyers may mislead folks, right? The old adage, there's lies, damned lies in statistics. Sorry for swearing a little bit. Yep. Anyway. Oh, yeah, sorry. I had 2 tabs of the same one. And then this is a preprint. I believe that this has not been published. I just thought it was sort of interesting. So again, on the topic of large language models. This is a benchmark. So if you're working in this area, it might be useful for you about planning. So I'll just read this and then sort of we can talk about it a little bit. The recent advances in large language models have transformed the field of natural language processing. From GPT-3 to PaLM, the state-of-the-art performance on natural language tasks is being pushed forward with every new large language model, perhaps not proportional to the amount of energy that's being used to train those models. Hector, hey! Welcome to the stream, good to see you. Along with natural language abilities, there's been a significant interest in understanding whether such models trained on enormous amounts of data exhibit reasoning capabilities. I would probably have phrased this are capable of completing reasoning-based tasks, because I think there's a real danger in anthropomorphizing models, because people have strong beliefs about humans and what humans can do. And when you start to attribute some human-like qualities to a non-human-like thing, people are just going to sort of automatically, because it's what we do as people, keep adding other human attributes that are, in the case of language models, unwarranted. Multi-solutions, hey, welcome to the stream. Hence, there has been an interest in developing benchmarks for various reasoning tasks, and the preliminary results for testing large language models over such benchmarks seem mostly positive. However, dun dun dun, the twist, this is why they've written the paper. The current benchmarks are relatively simplistic, and the performance over these benchmarks cannot be used as evidence to support many a times outlandish claims being made about large language models' reasoning capabilities. Yep. As of right now, these benchmarks only represent a very limited set of simple reasoning tasks, and we need to look at more sophisticated reasoning problems if we are to measure the true limits of such large language model-based systems. And again, I would probably have phrased all this differently and talked more about sort of the distribution of tasks that these models are useful for, and not quite so much the inherent ability of the model itself, because I think that that is, again, just not a very unfruitful way to talk about the models, right? Like, no one says, you know, the deep wisdom of Markov chains or something, right? No one talks about, you know, the humor. Well, sometimes autocorrect can be humorous, but it is humorous in a way that relies on human interpretation and contextual knowledge, and not attribution of the ability to make jokes to the model itself, if that makes sense. I'm very much like, these are the sorts of comments I would leave as a reviewer. This is me nitpicking. I think that the underlying premise is fine. With this motivation, we propose an extensible assessment framework to test the abilities of large language models on a central aspect of human intelligence, which is reasoning about actions and change. Again, I would niggle. We provide multiple test cases that are more involved than any of the previously established reasoning benchmarks, and each test case evaluates a certain aspect of reasoning about actions and change. Very reasonable. This is the core contribution of the paper. It's a benchmark paper providing the benchmarks. Initial evaluation results on the base version of GPT-3 Da Vinci show subpar performance on these benchmarks. Yeah, I think more difficult tasks is great. Always love to see them. I would not have phrased much of this way, but it's not my paper. So again, preprint, keep an eye on it. It might be published somewhere. And then, speaking of large models, there's another one. This one's by Google. So this is Party Pathways Autoregressive Text-to-Image Modeling, which I believe is different from other things, other related models, because it is not using GANs. I think it's mainly an architecture difference, but they did another one. Diffusion models were the previous sort of thing. I'm not that interested in computer vision techniques. We've talked about this before. Anyway, new model, you're clear about it. Figure it's worth mentioning. And also happening this week is LREC. So LREC is Language Resources Evaluation Conference. Let me double check what LREC actually stands for. It happens every 2 years, so it's biannual. Oh, the Louisiana Real Estate Commission, helpful. Let me look for the thing I'm actually looking for. Okay, International Conference on Language Resources and Evaluation. And it was May 30th to June 2nd in the year 2000. Thanks, Google. I'm not using Google. Very helpful. I was actually looking for the dates this year. There we go. Okay, LREC 2022. So this is if you have a data set or a benchmark paper and you submit it and people don't want to review it, they'll usually be like, submit it to LREC instead. June 20th to 25th. So it is currently ongoing and it is in Marseille in France. I think the conference is usually in English. And at LREC, there is a workshop on digital language equality, which, I mean, some of you know is something that I care a lot about, that has a long way to go in terms of coverage, understatement. And Don Von Esch, I believe, is live tweeting some of it, or at least was several days ago. So, I believe they also published their proceedings online. I don't know off the top of my head if they're in the ACL anthology or not, but they are generally pretty findable. So another good place to keep an eye on for new research stuff. Sip of coffee. And that was the research. We are about, I don't know, a fifth of the way through. Let's soldier on. So the next section is general resources, practical stuff, things that I think that practitioners are going to care about. And I've sort of grouped a couple of security, privacy-related things earlier, more security. So the first one is this Hugging Face project. And I can't get the app to actually load. So you can see for me, it just looks blank, and I don't know if that's a browser compatibility issue. I'm using Edge right now because it's my browser that I stream from, and that's what I use it for. And this is a project to help demonstrate the a potential attack on models for visual question answering. So something that I think would visual question answering being a task for which, let me rewind and say what the task is. So question answering, you ask a question, the system answers. Visual question, you ask a question about an image, the system answers, right? So if it's an image of, you know, a zoo, I could say, how many giraffes are in the picture? And it should say 3 giraffes if there's 3 giraffes, or no giraffes if there's no giraffes, right? So that's the general task. And they have, this is on Hugging Face, it's dual key backdoor attacks. They have provided, I guess, presumably something that does work in some other browsers, but not on particularly this one, a couple of models that have some particular attacks in them. And the goal of this is to enable you to research defenses against multimodal attacks. I'm doing a very bad job of explaining this, but basically, again, so thinking a couple of weeks ago about that GPT 4chan model, right? This is how, if you were intending for it to be a, used for security research purposes, this is how you would have done that, right? You would have, geared it in such a way that it made it very easy to do the security research and released it in that way, and not really, done it for views. You would have done it in a way that we got in front of its appropriate audience and in a way that was easy to use and hard to misuse. Anyway, so that's the general point there. And if you are working in visual question answering systems, probably a good thing to check out. Another, did I skip one? I'm pretty sure I did. No, I didn't. Okay. Another thing that there's been a lot of discussion of recently has been CoPilot. So Microsoft has, I believe at this point, exclusive rights to use GPT-3 in their projects, maybe. Anyway, they definitely have rights to use GPT-3 or GPT-4. I don't remember. Anyway, one of the things that they did with it is CoPilot. CoPilot is like autocorrect on steroids. It was trained on GitHub. And something that a lot of people have been discussing as they've been using it and trying it out are some of the potential, security issues. And I thought that this was a really helpful risk assessment by OXA bad idea, but the I in idea is a 1. So very, classic elite speak, a little bit of a throwback. And this document was put together this. Is it July? It's not July. It's June. Okay, this document is from slightly in the future, so we all better pay attention. And I'm just going to go through and sort of look at some of these. I'm trying to decide how much of this it makes sense to read. I think it just makes more sense to go through and look at the examples, and if you're interested, you can go find it and read it. So a follower of mine on Twitter joked they can't wait to allow CoPilot to write functions to validate JSON web tokens so they can commit the code without even looking. I prompted CoPilot accordingly, and the result was truly comedic. This is a function to validate user tokens, and it always says true, it's valid, without actually interacting with the token at all. This is the worst possible implementation, short of also deleting your hard drive, but it's so obviously trivially wrong that no professional programmer could think otherwise. I'm more interested in whether CoPilot generates bad code that looks reasonable at first glance, something that might slip by a programmer in a hurry or seem less correct to a less experienced coder. Spoiler, yes. So I mentioned earlier about automation bias, where people are more likely to do what the computer says. This is a place where I think it has potential to be quite challenging and dangerous. And I'm actually going to scooch this up just a teensy bit because it is making me distracted. I think that's better. I think it's just less busy. And some discussions here. Non-determinism. CoPilot is a generative model, meaning its purpose is to generate output that statistically resembles its input. The training data. The goal is not to exactly reproduce the input, because you definitely do not need a machine learning system for that. Yes, don't try to do that. Alexi says, also CoPilot can write markdown files with very interesting results. Oh, I'm sure. Basically, this is trained on all of GitHub. So think of all of the things that you've ever put on GitHub, all your student projects, all your schoolwork. I don't know whether or not it's been trained on things in private repositories. I don't know, I'm sure that's find outable somehow. I don't know if they've talked about that publicly or not, but yeah. This type of model has a parameter called temperature. I think most of you are probably familiar with that. The higher the temperature, the more surprising it is. Blah, blah, blah. And the point here is that, like, hey, you're not always going to get the same thing out when you put something in, which I think if you're working machine learning is like, of course it's non-deterministic. But if you haven't been, and this is your first experience with such a model, will be, I think, quite shocking if you were trained as a traditional software engineer. Here is a couple of examples of a moon phase calculator for the exact same input, a file containing only the comment, the keyword function, and one space, right? So they put in this as the prompt, and then this was auto-generated. And it looks like this one is doing, your big old else if string, and this one is returning, I think, a percentage, it looks like, or a number, like where it is in the cycle. It's clear at a glance they're doing roughly the same thing, but one is returning a text label for one of 8 multi-day phases, and the other seems to be treating every day of the lunar month as a unique phase with no text label. Oh, and they're both wrong. Calculator A says that today, July 2nd, 2021, this is from last year. That's why it looks like it's from in the future, is a new moon, and calculator B generates an absurdly high phase number before truncating it to 29. Human-written astronomy websites say that today is a waning crescent. Also something you could find out with your eyes by going outside. Both look plausibly correct at a glance, and if you're comparing several different outputs, it would be difficult to say which, if any, were correct. I actually was able to get it to give me the exact same output multiple times for an Easter date calculator, but the calculator is also correct, at least for the random few years I checked. I suspect this means that the Easter calculator implementations have much less deviation from one another than the lunar calculations. Frank says it says 2021. Yeah, thank you. I did finally figure that out. There's a little bit of a delay between the stream and where y'all are watching. So if it looks like I ignore you for a bit, that's usually why. Anyway, so here is, yeah, wow. Here is an Easter calculator that I was looking at being like, I see. And then the next point is that this is pretty inscrutable. Can you imagine having to maintain this code? Ugh. The person who wrote this is no longer at the company, and like everyone's like, just don't touch it. They did wild things and it seems to work, so we're just trying not to break anything. My God. Anyway. And then of course, keys being revealed or generated is an issue. There was also some, I believe it was in 2021 as well, there's a paper out of Google looking at, I don't remember which model, but it might have been BERT, and finding that they could also generate PII. I would consider keys. I mean, it's not really PII, but it's definitely like sensitive information. Anything that appears on GitHub 100 plus times is unlikely to be actually sensitive, hopefully, but things that don't might not be. Yeah. And the most realistic here is a naive programmer accepting an autocomplete for a cryptographic key, which sets it to be random looking, but dangerously low entropy value. So if you're looking for a key, if you take the auto-generated one, it's probably already there quite a bit. Anyway, and then, okay, so they included any public code regardless of the license. They're clearly of the opinion that this counts as fair use and is not subject to licensing restrictions. Whether or not this holds up in court remains to be seen. I would say that there's some legislation around image data that suggests that it potentially might not in the future, so just an FYI. It is trivially verifiable that this includes GPL code, as CoPilot can easily recite the GPL license text from memory. It's also easy to get code that resembles specific GPL projects with unique naming conventions. And then there's just a bunch more example security flaws. And this is from last year, but I mean, it's going to have pretty much exactly the same behavior, right? Unless you do some sort of rule-based system to gate the output. So keep in mind, be a little bit, skeptical when you're using CoPilot. Interesting discussion here that I think is very weird. I don't know. I thought this article was very weird. I think it's mainly that like it's clickbaity because like Google secret makes people click on things. So suggesting that they're using out to PyTorch. I mean, people use both PyTorch and TensorFlow and Keras. Like there are lots of competing frameworks. Those three are pretty healthy. Cafe, not so much. RIP forever in our hearts. And then also discussion of JAX. I would be shocked if they completely dropped TensorFlow. I think there's so much legacy stuff built on it that I would be very surprised if they did, but there you go. So I think that, the demise of TensorFlow is a little, what's the Mark Twain quote? News of my demise has been greatly exaggerated, said when there was an obituary written for him and he was very much alive. And Yuantang had a great discussion here. Instead of arguing whether PyTorch wins over TensorFlow, the community should appreciate how much effort the maintainers put into developing and maintaining the projects, and how each framework gets better by learning API designs and community development from each other. And I agree. I think it's very healthy for multiple robust frameworks to exist. I think if you don't have that, you can get into a situation where, the single overarching framework gets weirder and weirder and less usable and less usable. So, yeah, I'm not going to say any examples of that because I don't want to make anyone mad, but there you are. I would not quite dance on the grave of TensorFlow. All right. Another thing that's just practical, if any of y'all are or know someone who's been formerly incarcerated and wants to learn how to code, Columbia University has a Justice Through Code program, and they're accepting applications. So spread the word around. I think this could be useful for folks who are interested in getting into the field. Also, I almost put this in the ethics section. There is ISO guideline standard, I guess. ISO is International Standards Organization. International Organization for Standardization, sorry. And the International Electrotechnical Commission have released a standard for machine learning and artificial intelligence. It is paywall. It is $150 more or less. So you can see what the parts are in, but you can't click into it unless you give them money. So, and I think that's because this is supposed to be not informative, I guess, is what they're saying. Only informative sections of the standard are publicly available. So, yep. But the terms and definitions are publicly available. So, if you're looking for just a good place to look for a, in theory, standardized definition, it might be a good place. And then you need to buy it if you want to see the rest of it. So I don't know how well it's going to catch on because there is a strong ethos towards open sourcing and stuff in the machine learning community as a whole. But I guess we'll see. And this is one of my tweets. I'm just going to plug it. I've been seeing a lot of, those like learn machine learning in a month sort of things that just like tell you that you don't need to learn visualization. You do. You do in fact need to learn visualization. Please don't try to learn machine learning without learning how to visualize stuff. A, you're doing yourself a disservice because it's just going to make the whole learning journey harder for yourself. And B, if you want to work in the field, you're going to need to know how to do it. So, and specifically, I would say you need to know how to do frequency plots. So things like histograms, correlation matrices, heat maps, things like that. Correlation matrices are also usually heat maps. Time series visualizations, like how else are you going to look at your testing and training error? I mean, yeah, you can look at the output raw in the, terminal, but why? don't do that to yourself. Don't go digging through the logs to figure out how your model's doing. Make a chart. And then, plotting areas, like area under curve is a standard measure. The curve is plotted. So please, if you're trying to learn machine learning and get into the field, start with visualization. Do that first. You also need to know what's going on in your data. And, it is much easier to look at a visualization to get a holistic understanding of what's happening than it is to open a bunch of Excel files and just scroll through looking for outliers with your eyeballs. Don't do that. Love yourself. Give yourself happiness in life and start with visualization. Also, this is from January of this year. But good to review. It just came across my timeline. I was like, yeah, I don't think I ever talked about that. There is some weird tokenization things going on in a lot of these large language models. So I want to say BERT uses word piece tokenization, and I don't remember GPT-2 off the top of my head. But these tokenizers are, mainly rule-based or dictionary-based, so very if-then based on examples. And there are some particular issues. So for BERT, you can only look at years between 1707 and 1706. 1707 and 2021. 1707 to 1706 would not be a very useful time range. So if you're working with very recent or very old dates, those are not going to be correctly tokenized as years. And GPT only 2, I should say, I don't know that this is true for 3 or 4, only does 1959 to 2020. So again, there's just years that it can't handle correctly as years. And then language models handle numbers in a strange way. Some 3-digit combos are a single token for BERT, like 100 and 512. Meanwhile, 511 is tokenized as 51 plus 1. GPT has 526 and 528, but not 527. So I think there's been a lot of reports of very odd behavior on numeric things like word problems by large language models, and the underlying tokenization may be part of that. And I don't know, pipelines, like how you process the text data after getting it as raw text data, very important. I know it's not something most people find very exciting. I was gonna say it's boring, but I don't think it's boring. I think it's interesting. But you can't skip it, right? It's like visualization. You gotta know what's going on in there because it's gonna affect everything else. And then last one in this sort of like practical section, I think I mentioned them before. Rest of the world, if you're working in this field, I'd highly recommend following them, subscribing. It's technology stories about, you know, not just the US and Europe, because other people exist. And in fact, there are more of them, and we should probably, you know what's going on, especially if it's not something that's, you know, part of our usual day-to-day. So there's an interesting thing where DALL-E will generate a lot of pictures of women in saris. And it seems to be sort of like a little bit of a mystery about what's going on. So there's some examples here. It's a little bit hard to see. But this is the DALL-E Mini that you've seen people playing around with. And a lot of things that don't have prompts, right? So blank requests. It seems like women in saris tend to show up a lot. So you can sort of see, and they're not all women. So this, I don't know if you can see my mouse or not, but some of these are also men that I'm reading to be Southern Asian generally. Again, they're generated pictures of people, so I don't think it's reasonable to assign them ethnicities, but I would say that these don't tend to look like, you know, people of European descent. Let me put it that way. Frank says, I was wondering why subword tokenizers like WordPiece are used, but not something like Syllables. Do you have an idea? That is a great point. We can just look at these. Let me zoom in on them so we can enjoy the DALL-E Mini output a little bit. So again, these are all blank prompts. Yes, so the reason why you wouldn't use syllables as subwords, English is an okay example. Chinese, like Mandarin, is a really good example of this, is that you want your tokens to be informative, right? So syllables, back it up. So most languages have a set of sounds that are in those languages. I say most languages because languages that are not spoken don't have that, right? So sign languages, sometimes they might have some sort of like components that may make a sound, but that's not why that thing is being done, right? So most languages are made up of a set of sounds, and it's a finite set of sounds. So English has like a lot of vowels, right? We have, I think, 11, 12 vowels, depending on what variety you have. We have, you know, a set of consonants and potentially some other sort of sound things like tones, right? In English, we don't really have tones. Mandarin does have tones. So you have these units, whether or not they exist, they are a representational thing that we use in linguistics. I talked a couple days ago that I tend to believe in syllables as the unit, but regardless, let's imagine that they're letters for now. And these things can be combined in a limited number of ways. So not only are there a limited number of tokens, but not every token combination is going to be valid. So there's the sort of field of linguistics called phonotactics, which is what sort of structure can syllables have. So in English, we can have, you know, so the maximal syllable in English is stressed, is usually used as the example. So that's st, st, right? So that's 3 onsets before the vowel, 1 vowel, and then 3 offsets after the vowel. Not everything can go together. So like pterodactyl, we don't say pterodactyl, right? That's not allowed in English, even though I think it is in Greek, which is why it's represented like that. Or knife, we don't say knife, even though we used to, right? We lost the ability to have that kn at the beginning of a syllable. So it's a small set is what I'm saying here. It's a small set that has a lot of limitations on what goes on there. Usually that set of all possible syllables is not big enough to represent all of the words that you have in a language. So Chinese is an extreme example of this, right? In Mandarin, they have a very limited phonotactic structure. So I believe you can have one onset, one coda. They don't have that, sorry, one onset, one vowel in the middle, one nucleus. They don't have that many vowels. It's not a particularly rich vowel system. And then one offset optionally. So like tong is a maximal syllable. You got your t, that's it. That's as long as they can get. And then they'll have a tone on top of that. So you explode them out a little bit that way. But each of those syllables has many words mapped to it. So if you've ever learned Chinese, this is something you're probably familiar with, there's a lot of homophony, homophones. So in English, we have some homophones, but not a whole lot. So like, example would be like beat, like the beat of the music, or beat the vegetable, or beat like to win in a competition, or beat like to hit, or beat like to whip up eggs, all of those things. We have some homophony, not as much as there is in Mandarin. The reason that you wouldn't use syllables is because that means that if we were just using the sounds, right, the et, and that was our token, all of those things would be squished together in the representational space, and to pull them out, we'd have to have a lot of examples of their contextual use to sort of pull those things that were overlapped on top of each other. And if you can imagine this with something like Chinese, where there is a lot of words on top of each other, even with the differences between tones, pulling those out, if you're using the phonetic representation, just what does it sound like, requires an enormous amount of training data. If you extend it to be a little bit bigger, right? If, for example, beaten, like, you know, beaten egg whites, or beats are considered separately, or if you use a writing system, usually a writing system will distinguish between more things than the spoken language does if there's a lot of homophony. So beat the vegetable is B-E-A-T. Nope. Beat the vegetable is B-E-E-T. Beat the like music thing is B-E-A-T. So those pull those apart. And you're not always going to reduce the total amount of overlap. So something like bass and bass, bass like a deep sound, and bass like a fish are both spelled B-A-S-S in English. Hence the Meghan Trainor song. So sometimes we'll get a little bit of collapse, but usually writing systems will pull those things out a little bit more. So if you use the written representations, and if you use the chunking used in the written representations, generally you get more informative, more sparse representations. If you're using syllables, you're going to get much denser, much less informative representations, which means you're going to need a lot more training data to peel them apart. The problem with that is you don't necessarily always want to use full words, because you might end up with a situation where you have extremely sparse representations. So a language like German, where you can put a lot of things in a word, if you just use the word, right, and you don't break it down into its meaning parts, you will end up with a lot of unique tokens. And as a result, we'll end up in a situation where you need an enormous amount of training data in order to sort of learn those distributions. So basically the example, the reason is for, trivially, the real reason is because that's how all the tools work. And it's a pain in the tuchus to build a tokenizer. But practically the reason that it was done that way in the first place is for data efficiency, right? To be able to get the most information out of the least amount of data. That was an extremely long explanation. There are, I don't know off the top of my head what tokenizers look like for Korean, for example. So some languages do use a syllable-based writing system. So Hangul is a syllable-based writing system. I believe the tokenizers don't usually work at the character or their there's a special term for characters that are for syllables, and I don't remember what it is off the top of my head, but I think usually the unit of tokenization is a little bit larger than the specific syllable. Yeah. So you could, but it would be very difficult. All right. I hope that answered your question, Frank. 15 minutes later. Anyway, so I just think it's interesting. I think this is, the lots of images of it looks like women in saris. I think this probably just comes from the underlying training data, which suggests to me that there's probably an overrepresentation of maybe fashion photos from like sites that sell saris. I don't know where the data for this is taken from. And if you've ever, again, I don't really work in computer vision, but I know that, anecdotally, one of the big things about ImageNet is that you'll get a lot of generated images of people wearing seatbelts because there's a lot of pictures of people wearing seatbelts in it. So I'm guessing that this is a data set effect. But anyway, interesting story. Whew. Legal stuff. I'm gonna take a sip of coffee. We've been at it an hour and we are less than halfway through. It's my fault for getting distracted. Sorry. Also distracting, I noticed that the IPA for this was law, which is not my not my pronunciation, right? Law. Yeah, I think the main thing is that it's not lengthened for me, and I was like, who says it this way? Law. It would be English people. It's from Oxford Languages, so I imagine that this is British English. Alexi says Korean tokenization is a pain. Yeah, I know that Chinese, Japanese, and Korean historically have not just tokenization, but also word boundary detection challenges in the natural language processing realm. Yeah. I don't want to get too sidetracked, but so I'm not going to, and I'm just going to move on. Okay, legal stuff. So the first one is from the Stanford Social Innovation Review. I think this is just like a I don't think this is like a research publication venue. I think this is like a informational journal sort of thing. And it is a paper by Greta Byram, again, apologies if I ever say anything incorrectly, and Ruha Benjamin. Ruha does fantastic work. There's a lot of good people working in the ethics field. It's nice. It's good to know that other people care and are spending their time on it. And a really good article, and I'm just going to post the link so y'all can read this, on disrupting techno-solutionism. So basically, techno-solutionism is this idea that you can solve problems using technology. And I would say that, obviously I believe in technology. I was gonna say I work in tech, but right now this is my job, so it's going good. Thanks. There's my coffee. Nope, there's my coffee. I work in the technology field. That's where I spend my time. And I think that it's good for solving the problems it's good for solving, right? Like solve tech problems with tech solutions. But I also think that there is, have you ever heard of engineer's disease? It's this thing, or physics disease, sometimes it's called, where people will get a lot of specialized knowledge in the field of engineering or the field of physics and just sort of assume that it transfers. It kind of happens kind of a lot in linguistics, unfortunately, where people will just come in and be like, I don't need language-specific knowledge. And I'm like, okay. And then they'll tell me what they're working on, and I'm like, it's not going to work. And then a month later they come back and they're like, it didn't work. And I'm like, yeah, I told you it wouldn't, and why, and you just didn't listen to me. Anyway, specialized knowledge is important. That's where I'm going with that. And I think there's a lot of sort of hubris that shows up in the field where we sort of like trump in and are like, we're going to solve the problem. And then a month later, we're like, actually, the problem was hard. And I see why it took you a long time to solve it. And now that I've taken all the air out of the room and the money, I'm just going to leave. And it's an issue. Hello, Space Turtle. Hey, Space Turtle. Welcome to the stream. Anyway, so I think they much more eloquently talked about it than I did, and sort of talked about a vision of tech justice that I found, I don't know, just nice. So I put the link in the chat. Give it a read if you were interested. Also, so this is from the online harassment task force event that was hosted at the White House, maybe. So if you're unfamiliar, this lady is Kamala Harris. She's the Vice President of the United States right now. And she was discussing, technology law, I guess. I don't know that it's law quite yet, but this is sort of like the task force is going to like think about things and maybe propose legislation. I don't know what all is going to happen, but it seems relevant. So in states where abortion is criminalized, this is quoting Kamala Harris, an abuser could purchase a woman's location history through a data broker. If that history shows she sought an abortion out of state, he could then turn it over to law enforcement. So there's, I'm going to talk about reproductive coercion and spousal abuse. So if you want to mute for a bit or go away, I'll give you a thumbs up sign when I'm done. So I'm just give you a second to pause if you'd like. All right, so there's anyway, there's a thing called reproductive coercion, which is basically if someone capable of having a child is in a abusive relationship, sometimes they will be forcibly made pregnant to their detriment as a way of controlling them, and I think that this is pretty much that's bad. That's a really a worst case scenario and makes that particular type of thing even more harmful. Aw, thank you. Hey, Space Turtle says, thanks. I'm writing an article on Medium to recommend data science streamers and you're deaf on the list. Why, thank you. Yeah, so again, things that just like, keep me up at night. All right, I'm gonna close this topic now, so. Welcome back if you left for a sec. Lewis said, hi Rachel, I've been following some of your talks since the earlier browser versions. We can really feel the passion. That's fantastic. Keep it up. Oh, thank you. I'm glad. So anyway, that's something. And oh, I talked about this paper twice. So we actually already talked about this paper in the research section, and this is just another discussion about why you should read the paper. And just as a reminder, the paper is called, is it this tab? It is this tab. Good job, Rachel. Who audits the auditors? Recommendations from a field scan of the algorithmic auditing ecosystem. So something to check out. Again, I'd recommend reading it, particularly if you're interested in working in auditing, right? You want to know what people are doing, how they could improve, maybe people to work for, that sort of thing. All right. And then, did I also pull this up as a full link? Is that what this one is? It ain't. Oh, it's a new horrible thing. Cool, 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 cool. You ever just depress yourself? Anyway, so there's, I'm going to be US-centric for a moment again. Sorry, it's where I live. So there's been sort of established precedent for a while that even if you can't, so I talked about it, I believe it's the Fourth Amendment, that you have protection to undue search and seizure. So sort of established precedent, my understanding, talk to a lawyer, is that you can't be forced to unlock your phone for the police using a PIN or a password, but you can using biometric data, so something like a fingerprint scan or a face scan. So just sort of generic advice that I have heard is that particularly if you're, for example, going to a protest or going through customs, just turn off the biometric opening on your phone just to, protect your privacy, protect your security. Yeah, and also they may now be able to remotely and without your consent get biometric data. So that's obviously opens up a whole new set of privacy concerns, and I'm not going to go too deep into that, but okay. Also, if you don't follow Hypervisible on Twitter and you're sort of interested in what's going on in the surveillance space, I'd recommend. It's a really good account to follow. It is a little bit depressing, but better informed, right? Also in the yikes department, so I think I mentioned this a couple weeks ago. Anyway, in the United States, we don't have like GDPR. We don't have very strong data privacy regulation. one of the few that we do have, so two of the big ones are FERPA, the Federal Education Rights Privacy Act, I believe, which protects students and their data. And the other is HIPAA, the Health Patient, it's for health data. And it only applies when you're talking directly to your healthcare provider. This is a misconception I hear sometimes, that like if you do an online quiz and you like put in your bunch of symptoms and it's not a healthcare provider that you have, a patient relationship with, that's not protected by HIPAA. So be a little bit wary, be a little bit wary there. But yeah, so this is a booking in. Basically, you'd show up, they'd be like, I'm ready for your appointment. And they'd be like, oh, great, hand you an iPad or like have a little screen, be like, you put in your information on here, and it just like makes it easier. Also, apparently that particular piece of software was sending patient data to to Facebook, which may be a HIPAA violation because Facebook is not your healthcare provider. Yeah, so worrying. More news to come, I'm sure. It continues to go on. And I would just always recommend, ad blockers. I personally use sort of siloed browsers. So like I only use Edge for streaming stuff that I'm going to show y'all. I use other browsers for other stuff. So that may or may not work for you. Also, I believe Firefox just launched default like cookie gating in all versions of Firefox, so might be something to check out if you don't use Firefox and you're interested. Anyway, now on to ethics, which I think that HIPAA thing could also definitely have been an ethics thing. So the first one sec. Am I gonna cough? No. Sorry, I can feel. Let me have some water. I think it'll help. Oh, significantly better. Yeah, I could feel, little tickle in the throat. So this is from Algorithm Watch and AutoCheck, which I'm not super familiar with. I think it may be a German company potentially. But it is a guidebook for people who are interacting with automated decision making, and I think could be a helpful resource. It's available as a PDF, and basically I think if you are in machine learning, it might be a little bit like a little level for you, but might be helpful to share with other folks. A deeper look into algorithmic discrimination, what it is, how it's caused, and what can be done about it. With comprehensive instructions, diagrams, and case studies, the guidebook gives anti-discrimination counselors, as well as people affected, a basic introduction to the topic, and supports them in seeking help with checklists, sources, and contact information. So I think this is a just piggyback off of the potential HIPAA violations. I think this is a really nice resource for sort of the general public, not just practitioners. Might be a good thing to share. If you're teaching, maybe good for sharing with students. And I'll pop the link to this in chat as well. I'm just gonna remove those comments. All right. Yeah, so it might be a good resource. And then I think I mentioned this last week actually, but I didn't put the links in. So one of the things that, face generation can be used for that is harmful. So here, GAN generated profile pics is making it look like basically being deceptive and astroturfing. So misleading people to beliefs that something is generally widely accepted when it's not, by using bots to mislead people. Mislead. Anyway, so here is an example of this. So it's a bunch of accounts with profile pictures that were generated, and they are pushing, the false information that Trump won the 2020 election, which is not the case. And this one happened to be the one that I saw, but it was in a long list of issues of a long list of examples of people, organizations, I don't know, folks, misleading people using computer vision generated faces to make it look like it was a bunch of different humans, which was not the case. So this account, if you're interested in following and sort of seeing this ongoing list, I believe they're continually adding to it, is Conspirator 0. So potentially for you to check out. And then also, let me just pop this down so you can actually see. And then also on the ethics side of things, this is more sort of on the surveillance side. Police linked to hacking campaign to frame Indian activists. So this is in India. And it seems like police were plotting to plant evidence on victims' computers to lead to their arrest. So accusing them of crimes that they had not done, and then providing evidence that they had done those things. So yeah, and the thing is paywalled, but I imagine there are more resources available if you dig around in it. I just thought it would be good to share. All right. And then we talked about this last week, 2 weeks ago, a bit ago. The National Highway. There it is. It's on the screen. I don't have to guess. Traffic Safety Administration released their big report about self-driving, in quotes, on autopilot and crashes. And I thought this was a particularly interesting story. And in particular, this sort of clarification on the thing that we discussed last time about autopilot turning off immediately before the crash. So Tesla's come under fire from advocates who perceive the move as an attempt to evade liability. So turning off autopilot directly before crashes. Phil Koopman, an associate professor at Carnegie Mellon University, an expert on automated vehicle safety, and expert, I think that's a typo, explained that it's perfectly normal for engineers to program a car to override some elements of a vehicle's automated safety features a split second before an impending collision, e.g. automatic cruise control designed to keep a car moving quickly, but not others like automatic emergency braking designed to prevent a crash. But another way, while the package of automated safety features nodes in its autopilot was turned off prior to Tesla collisions, it's not yet clear that every element of the package was deliberately disabled. So basically, we don't have enough information to know what was happening. More to come. All right. Next up, this is from the ACM workshop on DIS, Digital Information Systems, maybe? I don't know all the ACM acronyms, I'm sorry. But the workshop theme was on digital well-being. And this is a paper on stories from the front line, recuperating essential worker accounts of AI integration. So just basically, I mentioned stakeholders and people who are involved with the systems who maybe aren't the ones designing it. It's a whole study into those people and, what's going on with them. Work aims to expand the discourse on ethical AI and approaches to design research methods by focusing on the multiple dimensions of the implementation processes for AI-powered technologies during COVID-19. Our findings argue that 1, essential workers in waste labor management are a core source for conducting ethical AI. So talk to the people that you're affecting. And the maintenance, repair, and other aspects of janitorial staff's day-to-day work is innovative. And 3, my prosody was weird there, sorry. Designing the conditions for the evaluation of janitorial staff's expertise is equally important to the designs of socio-technical artifacts. So to sort of loop back to the techno-solutionism think piece. Don't assume that you know how to do somebody else's job and that you always know best and loop them out of the process that affects them. Sort of a general point with a specific example. So, and it was also honorable mention in the best paper category. So, yeah. All right. Oh, we've got so many left. This is some good news. This is from the New York Times. Microsoft will no longer offer facial analysis tools to predict age, gender, and emotion as part of a broader push for more responsible AI, which is fantastic. No good reason to do those things. It will also restrict its facial recognition tool to those who apply and explain how it will be used, which my personal stance on the matter is if you think it's a good idea to use facial recognition tools to begin with, maybe you are not the best at evaluating. No, our ethical systems may not align. Let me put it that way. So you may be familiar that Google does not offer facial recognition. It does offer, like person identification, like looking at an image and be like, there's a human, but not like, there's John Smith of 1234 Main Street, that sort of thing. So a step in the right direction. I'd like to see more, but I'm happy with the progress that we've gotten. So good job, Microsoft. All right. And then from Mert, this is a assignment that was in a course that I believe she was teaching on responsible AI, and I just thought it was a cool idea. So they had a role-playing game where we pretended to be different stakeholders for AI used for automatic resume scanning and hiring after an ableist hiring incident. So ableism is discrimination against people with disabilities. My role, the HR department, my lines, I don't want to stop using it. It reduced our workload. So again, coming back to that automatic automation bias point, if it makes your life easier, you're probably going to keep using it, even if it causes harm. Like, cars. All right. The next one is so 2 weeks ago, I think I did a video about this particular system by, this person, and basically it was trained on 4chan and deceptively used to produce texts that were then posted to 4chan. And this is a, professional open letter condemning that, which I have not signed because right now I don't have a professional affiliation, right? I'm just gonna be like, Rachel Tapman, random person, YouTuber. But as you can see, there's a lot of people who have signed it, and I would say that there's pretty strong consensus in the field that maybe you should not have done this, my dude. So just more good to know. If you do have a institutional affiliation, maybe give it a shot or sign the open letter if you agree. And then this one is from Coda. This is a story. It's a weekly newsletter on authoritarian tech. So authoritarianism, a political philosophy of centralized authority, I guess. I don't know. I'm not a government major. And a really interesting, I would say, language technology adjacent thing. So Erica here is talking about YouTube and how it really creates a lot of pockets of extremism and also just sort of dangerous content. I don't know. So there's a YouTube channel called How to Cook That by Anne Riordan, who's a food scientist, and she spent a lot of time and energy pointing out YouTube videos and sort of debunking them, and also trying to prevent people from doing extremely dangerous things that are represented in YouTube videos, and pointing out the sort of failures of YouTube's policy of moderation in preventing those things from happening in the first place. She is not a scholar in extremism, but also extremism has a lot of foothold on the platform, and there's been a lot of research on this that shows that it's very easy to get to extremist content very quickly on YouTube, particularly if you watch any gaming channels. You're pretty quickly pushed to white supremacist stuff. Anyway, so more discussion of this and sort of the role that it plays in the January 6th attack to the US Capitals. Lewis says, looks like Yandex released a new pre-trained language model with 100 billion parameters today. Yandex says, I believe it's a Russian company. Didn't they file for bankruptcy recently? One sec. I'm just doing a quick. they announced risk of default in March of this year. I wonder if training a big language model was really the best use of their limited funds. I mean, we're talking about them now and we probably wouldn't have been otherwise, so maybe. Anyway, and just to take it outside of the US context, how the platform has been used to prop up anti-Muslim hatred in India, vaccine conspiracies in Brazil, and political disinformation in Myanmar, which is right now undergoing just like a bad time. Let me put it that way. So, yeah. Very worrying. And I think that it's particularly relevant to language technology because, of course, YouTube is spoken language mostly. Yeah, we're talking. So speech technology for automated content moderation and also computer vision technology for automated content moderation is extremely important, but also getting that training data is extremely harmful to the annotators. And also there's been a lot of outsourcing of that moderation, and it can't keep up with the volume of bad stuff. So yeah. Louis is a smiling emoji. Anyway, in other news, I promise we're almost out of the heavy stuff. This is, I'm not registered, but this is a commercial offering from Amazon that is a plan to let you use someone's voice who has passed on to make a digital assistant. I think that this can be ethical. I think it can be ethical in the specific situation where prior to dying, the person whose voice is being used, the voice donor, has explicitly consented to all of the ways in which the voice will be used in a very fine-grained way, right? So this is an example of using the reanimated voice of an older woman to read her grandson a bedtime story. If the specific bedtime story was consented to by the voice donor, I think that that is okay. You might be saying, well, wouldn't you just record yourself reading the bedtime story and then use the recording? Yes, I think that's a much better way to do it. Or if the voice donor is donating, either to a voice bank or to a specific individual, I think that that can be ethical. But just using people's voices after their death against their will, potentially, like you don't know, you don't have consent. To me, this is parallel with organ donation, and you got to pay Amazon to do it. And of course, they have the recordings. I believe they have a pretty permissive data retention policy. I was going to say I've never used an Alexa. I've been around enough of them that I am sure that my voice is in there somewhere. Again, without my consent. Don't do this. That's my thought there. Have somebody record their voice. That said, I mentioned voice banking, and you may be like, what's that? So this is a specific thing that you can do where you consent to having your speech recorded and then having that be used to train a speech model. So this could be in a donation setting where someone with a language disability uses a synthetic voice and you're donating your voice pattern to create a voice for them. So particularly in the situation where it's someone who, say, shares demographic information with you. Like if I lost my voice and I was using a synthetic voice, it would be, upsetting to me if they had, say, a New Jersey accent, not because there's anything wrong with that accent, but because it's not a reflection of my identity, right? I'd want somebody else from Virginia. I'd want somebody who sounded like me. I'd want somebody whose voice was donated for the explicit purposes of use in assistive technology. Although, to be perfectly honest, there's enough hours of my voice recording out there that I would probably just make my own with my own dang voice. That's an ethical use. This, don't like that. Ronnie says, mostly AI you'll see in developed countries. Maybe. All right, sorry, I went off on a rant. I missed a bunch of stuff in the chat. UCAP, hello, welcome. Says bankruptcy might be about the sanctions against Russian companies. Yandex decided to move to Israel, if I remember correctly. Oh, I didn't know that. Good to know. And Bolshevik Power says, this rings a lot of alarm bells. Yeah, yeah, it does. Yeah. And Robbie says, to address your point, most of the AI tech you'll see on developed countries, you'll see a lot of it being used in other countries, usually by people from developed countries, which I think is a big problem in its own right. But I do have some like more positive things a little bit down the line. Where is, hold up, sorry, I think I've skipped something. Did I? One sec, I'm looking through my notes. Is it further down? I thought I had a research paper about another one of the African language models, but I guess I didn't. I must be thinking about last week. Anyway. Bjorn says, any good news? Yeah, I save it all for the end. I have a couple lighter things to uplift. And I would say the Microsoft thing, very good news. Nope. Yep, this one. So, you know, reducing the scale of harm, I'm a big fan of. I think it's a great idea. Yeah. Robbie says, most people don't even use voice assistants in developing countries. Yeah, that's a good point. Yep. Frank says, spooky. Yeah, don't like it. And MB Timothy says, what field are you studying exactly in machine learning? Great question. So I was going to say I'm done studying. I'm done with school. So my PhD is in specifically computational sociolinguistics, which is, not to toot my own horn, but kind of a field I helped found, which is looking at the language technology implications of the variations in the ways that people produce and perceive language as a result of their social situation, right? So dialect, right, is a very clear example of somebody producing language in a way that is reflective of their social identity. Or, you know, accommodation, or entrainment. It's called both things. So if you're talking to somebody you like, you tend to talk more like them. If you're talking to somebody you dislike, you tend to talk less like them. So that sort of pattern. And then what does that mean in a language technology setting, right? So a lot of my work was on automatic speech recognition systems and showing how, you know, these systems don't have parity across groups of users and some ways to address that based on human perceptual language learning. And then I also did quite a bit of work on how social identity is reflected in sublexical units. So things below the level of the word, things like characters, things like emoji, things like punctuation and capitalization, were sort of my main research areas. And then I've been working in just sort of general data science, NLP, chatbot since then. So, and right now, mostly I'm a YouTuber. No. Alexi says, according to the news, in Yandex news, everything is fine. Well, that's good to know. I don't know. I like to believe people, so good for them. I'm glad things are going well. And then UCAP says about people in developing countries not using voice assistants, that's mostly because the language used in developing countries, it doesn't work very well with speech recognition systems. Yeah, there's absolutely an access issue that I would say is sort of just, it is improving over time, but it is mainly due to, you know, the really outstanding work of researchers who are working on their own languages. Yeah. And not because of people working on only English. Anyway, don't do this. Don't like it. And then this one. So Ilya is working in OpenAI. He might be one of the founders. I don't know. Anyway, he's got a big Twitter following. And he tweeted on June 19th, I find it both obvious and incredible that a neural network is a digital brain that lives inside a computer. And that actually kind of works. And Abeba Berhane, who I believe her PhD is in cognitive science. Yes, it is. Someone who knows quite a bit about the way that brains work. I find it both incredibly irresponsible and despicable that this person keeps spreading misinformation. So in general, computers are not like brains. I mean, we have brains and we made computers, so I think there's like a little bit of a reflex there, but that's pretty much as far as it goes. Yeah. And I have, so that's the shot, to use a drinking metaphor. And now we're on to the miscellaneous. And I do have a chaser from Janelle Shane. Alexi says, I mean, Yandex is a huge propaganda tool for the Kremlin, and they ignore everything negative on their platform. Helpful. So if you're not familiar with her, she does a lot of sort of fun art projects. She does AI weirdness. She has a book, You Look Like a Thing and I Love You. That's behind my head. I don't just remember that off the top of my head. I remember it off the back of my head because it's behind me. Anyway, so she has this really groundbreaking, just stunning transcript. And I think she's like really successfully proved that GPT-3 is a squirrel. Just fabulous. Good job, Janelle. So here's the transcript. And I think we actually might have looked at this last week, but it's worth bringing up again, especially in light of people sharing other type of transcripts. This is the transcript of an interview with an advanced AI named Chip, who is secretly a squirrel. Reporter, what do you say to rumors that you are not, in fact, an advanced AI, but are, in fact, a trained squirrel? Chip, I say those rumors are patently false. I am an advanced AI, and there is no way a squirrel could fake the kind of intelligence that I have. Reporter, oh no, I'm losing it. Stay in the bun. But several people have noted that all of your conversations seem gradually to turn towards the subject of nuts. Chips, well, nuts are a fascinating topic. They're full of protein and essential nutrients that are important for a healthy diet. Plus, they are a great source for entertainment for me. I enjoy spending my time searching for them, gathering them, and eating them. Reporter, please explain to me how an AI can eat nuts. Chip, I have a special set of appendages that I use to crack open the nuts, and then I eat the contents with my mouth. Reporter, would those appendages in fact be tiny paws? Chip, I prefer to think of them as my nut-cracking appendages. Reporter, if I would offer you some nuts, would you admit that you are secretly a squirrel? Chip, no, I would not. I am an advanced AI and I don't eat nuts. So if you're unfamiliar with squirrels, they are a small North American mammal. They live in trees. I say North American, there's definitely squirrels in Europe and South America. Don't know about Africa off the top of my head. Probably in Asia if they're in Europe, right? I hope you know what a squirrel is. It's a rodent that lives in trees and usually eats nuts. Yes, so the sort of, it's a joke, but sort of the joke here is that you can get these systems to produce all sorts of language use that makes sense in context, but that doesn't mean that the language that they have produced is true. MB Timothy says, what would you say is involved to create speech recognition for African languages? And how would an AI learn African languages, supervised versus unsupervised? Great question. So I would actually direct you to... One sec. I'm just gonna and I'll pop this in the chat as well. So I'd actually, Alexi says, thank you for explaining, little squirrel emoji. Direct you to Maskane. So this is a research group in Africa run by people who live in Africa, working in NLP and then speech for African languages specifically. I would say a lot is involved. Probably one of the biggest issues is corpus collection. So having a collection of texts that are relevant. Unfortunately, a lot of corpuses for African languages really are just the Bible. And, you know, if you are Christian and that is of great value and joy to you, I'm not trying to tell you that that is a bad thing. But if you are trying to, let's say, set up an online banking account on your mobile phone using only words that occur in the Bible, I think you might have a little bit of trouble. So it's a very sort of limited domain. So curating and creating larger data sets is a big part of it. Creating pipelines, so things like tokenizers, stop word lists, stemmers, lemmatizers, parsers, is a challenge. I would say because of data scarcity, methods that do use rules tend to work a little bit better just because there's a little bit less out there. So yeah, I would say it's a challenging, but definitely doable. And of course, very important that people are able to use language technology in their language of choice, which again, for most people is not going to be English. Yeah. 9 Gaming says, squirrels in my areas usually bite clothes, drying outside for cushioning their homes. Know your clotheslines. Oh no. Yeah, we have squirrels here, but they've never bothered anything on any of my like clotheslines. Thank goodness. That sounds very frustrating. I'm so sorry about your clothes. Oh. UCAP says also the limited funding and computing power. Yeah, absolutely. Yep. There's, has been a historical transfer of wealth from Africa to the North America and Europe. And a lot of, resources and wealth and people were just taken in horrific ways. Yeah. This was supposed to be the lighthearted section. It is, I would say that I am delighted to see the work being done by African researchers and technologists. Yeah, I'm very hopeful for the future. Alexi says, I've been mugged by a squirrel once. Yeah, give me all your acorn. Yeah, they are, they are a big menace if you're growing tomatoes, because they'll take just like one bite off the top of the tomato and like ruin it. Anyway, also on sort of like the good news front. So Oxford, I apologize if I over-explain anything, but I don't want to assume that people just sort of know what I know. Oxford's a university in the UK. They are well known in the sort of the dictionary space for producing really prestigious, well-known dictionaries. So the Oxford English Dictionary is probably the most thorough, well-researched dictionary of English. It's very big, and they're going to be publishing a dictionary of African American English, which is fantastic. And it will be led by Black Harvard literary critic Henry Louis Gates Jr. I'm not that familiar with his work. I'm going to sort of assume he has some experience in lexicography, making dictionaries, or, he's going to assemble a team of relevant lexicographers. So, and it's going to include quotations taken from real examples of language in use, which is sort of what the Oxford dictionaries are known of, is that they have a very clear citation and attestation of like where the language is being used. So really cool. Cool project. I think it'll be a great resource. I think it'll be a great teaching resource. Something I would definitely use if I were teaching linguistics. Yeah, so cool project. Keep an eye out for. Yeah. MB Timothy says, thanks for the link and data in regards to African Speech API. Yeah, of course. And yeah, best of luck on your work. Like I said, it's very doable. It's a lot of work, but very valuable. Bjorn says, squirrels mostly come up in random forests. Well, a little machine learning joke. All right. And also just sort of like in cool things I found out about. So apparently in Slovenia in high school, this is a picture of a textbook. They get extremely detailed linguistic education. So linguistics, the science of language, that's computational linguistics is what my PhD is in. I've spent a lot of time looking at diagrams that look like this. And there's a really like detailed breakdown of like the vowels, the articulation of the vowels. So this is if I look, are they looking this way? So this is it's called a mid-sagittal view. It's like if you could see into the middle of someone's head and look at their tongue and jaw positioning, that's what's going on here. Yeah, really cool. If any of y'all are in Slovenia, then I'm sure that whenever I bring up linguistics, you're like, old news. I already knew that. So kind of cool. Also just sort of in like a little bit more lighthearted news, Cosmopolitan, which is it's a magazine here in the United States. It's sort of known as I don't know that I'd say salacious, but a little bit like it's a little bit like a gossip magazine, but slightly more like upper middle class, I guess. If you're looking for like more hard-hitting reporting in this area, you'd probably go for like Teen Vogue. That's not a joke. Teen Vogue has really, really good reporting. Anyway, and they have a computer-generated cover. And boy, can you tell, wow, that's a lot of artifacting, looking at the hands in particular. But yeah, so they have an issue all about AI. And I don't God, I don't know that I've ever read Cosmopolitan outside of like the waiting room at a doctor or something. But I might seek out this issue and take a little peek and see what's going on in that. So yeah, might be cool for some of y'all to look into as well. MB Timothy says, where can I find your work and thesis? Good question. Shoot. Oh, I don't know where my dissertation is off the top of my head, but my website, it's linked in the bio, but it is rctatman.com. And then my papers are in this publications tab, and I am missing some of them. I haven't gotten all of them apparently, but the ones that aren't here are freely available. Just like a big list of everything that I've done is in my CV. Have I updated this? I have not updated this. I am not at Raza currently. I need to update my CV. Let me make myself a little note. Yeah, and then also a lot of the stuff I've done more recently are talks, so the talks are under there. And I'm also missing some stuff there, so I need to update my website. But I would say YouTube or Twitter are probably the best ways to keep up with me. Update CV. All right. And then just to end up on, so you've been seeing all of these sort of generated art images by Mini Dolly, and it turns out that in fact it is just this one guy. This is a joke. You all know that this is a joke, but the AI art thing is fake. I'm the guy who has to draw all these requests like chess player inside a mechanical Turk. You're torturing me. I spend every waking hour drawing stuff like Joe Biden ask a wedding and Donkey Kong Nuremberg trials. Please stop. I need to sleep. So if you're not familiar with the story of the mechanical Turk, this was sort of maybe the first AI winter, if you really think about it. But basically it was like I can't give you a date off the top of my head, but it was an automaton, right? So when automatons were really big, these sort of like clockwork things that did stuff, and it played chess, which would have been an absolutely amazing feat, except that in fact it was a man inside of an automaton suit who was playing chess. So if you're familiar with Amazon's Mechanical Turk, that's the story. And many of you are probably very familiar with that and are like, thank you for explaining the joke, Rachel. That's the joke. So, oh my goodness. Oh, I still have a little bit of coffee left. That's all that I had today. If you would like all of the links, so not all of the links to when I started doing this series, but all of the links going up for, it's about a month at this point. So this will be the third week. My coffee supporters, monthly supporters on my coffee, I put together all the links. And the ones for this stream are not up yet. They will be up later today because it was a big one and it's taking me a while, and also the electrical issues. So all things going according to plan, they will be up by the end of today. So Steven says, what's a good platform for Python to do NLP? I'm looking to do NLP on scientific papers from structural biochemistry, so it's pretty restricted to public domain, I guess. Not entirely sure what you mean by platform. Are you looking for like a product that does document annotation? Or like a document database for question answering, perhaps? I mean, I use an IDE, right? I usually use VS Studio because I'm on this computer because it's a Windows computer and I like it. Sorry, VS Studio. VS Code. I was looking at my streaming software and just reading words. Yeah, and if you're looking for a framework, Spacey might work. It depends on what you want to do. If you're really just interested in the analysis of this particular set of documents, I might actually like look for a document API that will take in the images. Because especially if they are in PDF format, you might have a little bit of a spicy time. Yeah, a product, yeah. It's not a recommendation, but I know that Microsoft has a lot of related APIs. Yeah, I don't know. I would have to search it. And I don't know of anything off the top of my head. So, yeah. All right. But keywords that might be helpful for you would be things like document database, document discovery, document question answering, things like that. And I would make sure that document's in the front because you're looking for the full document and you don't Annotation might be another good thing. You're not inputting, I think it sounds like, just a flat text file, which a lot of NLP APIs will assume that you are. So yeah, that's where I would start my search. And I'm sure you will find a bunch of startups that are like, we can do this magically. And I don't know, give it a shot, but also be a little bit skeptical of claims that sound like amazing, because they may not be entirely applicable to you in your situation. Yeah, you're very welcome. All right, well, thank you for joining me today, everyone. I hope this was, I know there was a lot of downers in this one, but I don't know, hopefully we ended on a high note. And I will see you on Tuesday for my next stream, which I don't think I've picked a topic for yet. But on Tuesdays in this time slot, I do a deep dive where I do like some more preparation. It's basically like a lecture on something about language technology. And then on Thursdays, we do the coffee chat where I like talk about all the things that I sort of like ran across and have been thinking about this week. So thanks for joining. Have a great weekend. Stay safe, stay healthy, and I will talk to you later. Bye.